I take this step and I look down, and there it is, coiled up on my mid-step.
This is one of these days you're by yourself.
I'm with my
You're
dog.
Sally.
My dog's ahead of me,
Okay.
and then I see the snake. Right, I'm just right stepping across it. Oh my God! And I kept on going.
Where were you born, Greg?
Brisbane, Australia,
Okay. Did you grow up?
or as Americans would call it, Brisbane.
Brisbane? That's right.
We used to have McHale's Navy as a television show when I was growing up, and so you're sitting in Brisbane, and they'd say, "We're going on leave. We're going to Brisbane."
Brisbane.
You just laugh, you know, and they got no idea. But anyway, there you go.
Do you have siblings?
No.
You're the only child?
Only child. Yeah,
Are your parents?
my parents tried to have more, but unfortunately my mother had a number of miscarriages, and then they gave up. But they tried.
Okay. Are your parents still with us?
No. My father would be 95 today.
Okay.
Today's his birthday. He'd be 95
Wow.
today if he was still alive. But he died very young. He died at 51.
How old were you when he died?
I was 25.
Oh,
So that was
you-
1970.
So you had him throughout your life.
1978, 1978, and then he passed away with cancer, lung cancer.
Okay.
Yeah, my mother, you know, she also died of lung cancer. She was about 83 when she died. So both died of lung cancer. Me too, perhaps, I don't know, through that passive smoking when I was a kid. I don't know. But my mother stopped smoking. She stopped smoking like decades before she died, and but still, in the end, it was lung cancer.
So what was it like growing up? Did you stay there? How long
Well,
did you live
I
there
was
before
born
you-
in Brisbane, then we went out in the bush.
Okay.
So we went out to a place called Isisford, which is where my mother grew up. She was from the bush. And you'd call it a one-horse town in America. It was like that very small place.
Okay.
And my father was running sheep properties. We don't call them ranches, we call them properties, a sheep property. So there was two. There's one called Balcomo, and then another one later called Boobra. So he was the manager of the property, so out there. And then my first schooling was, we called School of the Air. School of the Air. So you'd be at home, you'd have a headphone and a microphone, and the teacher would be somewhere with a whole bunch of kids scattered in these rural areas who've got no school to go to, and you'd study with your mother on School of the Air. I did that first, so School of the Air. And then...
For how long?
Oh, that was about a year, I think, about a year. And then I went to, the first school I went to was in Isisford. It was a one teacher, one room school. You know, first years, row 1, year 2, row 2, year 3. I think we only went up to about row 5 or something.
You were the only...
In that school, I was in my group of year 1s in the front row.
Okay.
But one teacher, and only about, I don't know how many kids, maybe 20 kids max.
Kids.
So I did that until I was about 6. About 6, and then went, my parents moved to Brisbane because they knew I'm never going to get educated this way. So they moved for my education to Brisbane, which is where my father was from.
But did you enjoy the schooling that you had up until that time?
I was a kid, you know, I was out in the bush, it was fantastic. So fantastic, you know.
No, I'm talking about the schooling.
Oh, the schooling, I don't remember anything about the schooling, and it was a long time ago. I remember there was one teacher in one school, and you know, we were mostly playing games and cutting stuff up and doing, I don't know what the hell we were doing. Who knows what the hell we were doing.
Right.
But then we moved back to Brisbane, and my mother had not lived in Brisbane, so she came from the bush down to the big smoke, the big city. And I went to Sherwood State School, which is where my father had gone as a boy. And then we moved to a place called Oxley, a couple of suburbs out, very close, and went to Oxley State School, which is a very well-established old state school there. I went there, and then I went through Oxley High School, which is a combination of, you'd call it middle school in America, and high school. It's in one unit. In Australia, they call high schools one unit. And I went right through. And that was interesting because that was the first year that school opened as a high school. There was mainly servicing the migrant populations who'd come to Australia. So my class was full of Ukrainians and Poles and...
What years are we talking about now?
Oh, we're talking, let's see, I went to high school in 1966.
Okay.
And then I graduated in 1970. I was 16 when I graduated.
But that's from a 12 years.
12 years. 12 years, yeah.
So you were 16 when you graduated?
I was 16 years old, yeah, when I graduated.
In 1970?
1970, yeah.
I graduated in 1970.
We're very close in age. You're a little bit older than me.
I'm 1 year older than you because I graduated.
Yeah, about 1 year, yeah.
You said you were 16. I was 17 when I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm born in 52.
I'm born in 53. You're born in November, I think, is that right?
I'm October.
October. Well, I'm born in December, so we're very close.
We're very, very close.
Very close.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you this. So in the school, I'm just trying to picture this in my mind. When you were on your father's property,
sheep property, yeah.
What did he have you doing anything? You didn't just play all day.
Oh well, when we were living there, I was school of the year, so I'd go, the school of the year. It wasn't all day, a few hours, and then, my mother said that we had two sheepdogs, Peter and Paul, and I'd disappear with the dogs. And my mother, those days, you're on the property, right? Mm-hmm. Parents never worried about you.
So
you
just
take off.
You didn't have any duties then?
I had no siblings to play with, right? So
but you had no duties around the
just run around in the bush, and take the dogs with me. And then my parents always thought the dogs are with him, he's okay.
But did you do any hunting or did you fish? Did you get anything like that?
We fished. There was in the river. You had a river.
Okay.
It was freshwater fish.
Okay.
Some fishing, but I wasn't doing much fishing. I was only 5, 6 years of age, But this is the bush. We're talking, America's a bit different. You're a big country, but when I flew from LA to Denver,
mm-hmm.
we had a Dale Carnegie owners meeting in Denver, so I'd never been to Denver. So I flew across the Rockies, and I'm looking out the window, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, amazing. There are so many cities, so many towns along the way. In Australia, you'd fly that distance, there'd be no towns. There'd be nothing, it'd be zero. Kangaroos maybe, but it's like, wow, America is so populated compared to Australia with the almost same physical area. You take out Alaska.
That's right.
But we don't have the rivers, we don't have the,
it's not as lush, right?
It's not as lush. America's much richer.
We're more arid.
Very dry continent. We have a very famous poem by Dorothy McCullough. I love a sunburnt country. And it's a sunburned country. It's very brown. It's brown. It's hot.
So
not much.
Has it maintained? Has it basically stayed that way? Even now with the technology we have and the
what they've done is they've actually created a problem because in the bush, there's no big rivers for the most part, like the Mississippi Delta. They don't have that much of that. But they've been pumping water out of what they call the artesian basin. Mm-hmm. But what's happening is as the water level comes up, the salt comes to the surface too, and then you can't grow anything. So it's a complex problem in Australia. Australia is a very water resource poor country. Mm-hmm. You don't think of that, but it actually is. So it's a problem. But anyway, the bush was great for me as a kid, running around like a crazy boy, having a fake go.
So when you finally got to Brisbane and you went there, how did that change your life? What did you see?
Well, my father was a guy who he'd left school at 13. So it means he got to probably year 4 or 5.
Did he have a big family himself?
He had 7, 1 of 7.
And he's what number?
In those days, when you go back, they're all like, you look at the family tree, 7, 7, 7, 7.
And they needed them to help them with the property.
Yeah, well, he was a 5th generation Australian. I'm a 6th generation Australian, so we've been there a long time. But he at 13, he didn't like school. So in those days, so that's fine. If you don't like school, you've got to go to work. So he was sent out to the bush at 13 years of age by himself to work on a property,
Somebody else's property.
As a labourer, to work on somebody else's property, right? So he could do everything. Motors, anything like that, fix things, amazing. He was a slaughter beasts, fences, the whole farming thing. So we were actually on a 5-acre sort of hobby farm, you'd sort of call it, in Brisbane, actually. It was where we were living. And so we were growing crops, and we had bloody cattle, and we had pigs and
Did you have to
chooks.
do stuff then?
I had lots of jobs, feeding the chooks and taking care of the pigs, and helping my father.
Did you have anything that you favoured, that you felt like I really like doing this?
No, but I just enjoyed working with my father, because I felt like I'm a bit of a man here, help my dad. And my father's very handy. Not that I'm totally useless. My father's very handy. And so, frustrated farmer, he should have had a big farm. But, it was still 5 acres, and then all around where I was living was still undeveloped. It was all bush. So, I had my dog, Sally, and we'd head off after school and head off into the bush. and just disappear for hours, come back at dinner time. My father wouldn't even worry about it.
Now tell me
And I'd take the dog and a big stick.
The dog had a big stick?
No, I had the big stick.
You
had the dog and a big stick.
Okay, you had a dog and a big stick, okay.
For the snakes.
For the snakes?
Yeah.
Okay, but give me one day that you kind of remember where you actually went off in the bush.
Well, I'll tell you interesting.
Yeah.
Up until high school, through primary school, in the summer months, I never wore shoes. I go barefoot to school.
But don't you have thorns and stuff?
No, my feet were like
leather.
This table. They were like leather, I can tell you. So I used to walk through the bush to school. It's like a place I could go, and then come home. I'd do some homework, have a glass of milk or something, cookie or something. Do my homework, finish my homework, and then I could go out. So take Sally and we'd head out in the bush, and there were ponds and be turtles in the ponds, and there'd be snakes, water snakes, and this type of thing. Be careful of them. But
you didn't
lots
have
of birds.
You didn't have a purpose, like you said, because I used to. When I was young, I had a BB gun.
No, we weren't killing anything.
You didn't kill anything.
No. Oh, snakes, but you're trying to avoid them.
You tried to avoid them. You didn't go looking for them.
You're not looking for them. I remember I was walking along the path with my dog, looking up because I love birds. I recognise all the birds, and I could have this. My parents bought me this big, thick book called "What Bird Is That?" And I'd see a bird, I'd go home and I'd find that bird, or what about the nesting, and I'd study on this. I was very interested. And then one day I'm walking along, and I take this step, and I look down, and there it is, coiled up on my mid-step.
This is one of these days you're by yourself.
I'm with my dog. My dog's ahead of me, okay. And then I see the snake right. I'm just right stepping across it. Oh my God! And I kept on going. Fortunately, the snake didn't bite me because I was barefoot. I wasn't wearing anything. So, but that's Australia. Snakes everywhere. So you just.
Have you ever been bitten?
No. Well, see, I'm smart enough to. You don't treat snakes lightly. You don't play around with snakes. Right. Even if you kill them, they can still bite you.
Did you ever have anything happen to you while you were out there, like break an arm or nothing?
No. Fine.
You were good.
Yeah. Well, I think my parents wanted me to be independent. So, from a very young age, I was very reliant, resilient, independent, and that sort of carried through my life.
Did you learn to ride a bike?
Oh yeah, I had a bike.
Well, how old were you when you learned to ride your bike?
I think I had the bike when I was going to high school, so it must have been about 12.
So you hadn't ridden one before?
No, I remember my father was helping me to learn. The type of dad's holding the bike, and then he's not holding the bike, and down you go, But I used to ride my bike to high school. But I used to take avoid the main roads and go up the suburban roads to my high school, which is up this huge hill. That was always very punishing, but coming down was a bit scary. But
so you didn't have any motor vehicles or anything like that?
That was later when I started working on my first car.
Right. See, I'm trying to compare it to my time too, because I started working on motors, like lawnmower motors and stuff like that, and I made my own motorcycle when I was like 10.
No.
Okay.
My father was a mechanical.
All right.
Yeah, see, my father was a big gambler.
But where would he have to gamble?
Horses.
So they had a place close by, or he had to go a distance to get there?
How
would you do that?
When he's in the bush, they'd have a bookie, and they'd take bets on the horses, and you'd have the radio. You'd have the radio, get the results of the races, and then in the city you could go to the track on the weekends, on Saturday. And so, if you ever want to be poor, grow up poor, have a father who's a gambler. It was tough.
He loved it.
It was tough. Dad, paid on Friday, down the track on Saturday, misery all the rest of the week.
But your mom and dad stayed together the whole time?
Oh yeah, all the way through. My mother married my father, knowing he was a gambler, thinking she was going to change him.
And she never could.
The only thing that changed him was cancer. When he was about 49, he got cancer, and in 2 years he was dead. And he stopped smoking,
2 years,
stopped drinking. He was a big drinker, big gambler, big smoker. That was my dad,
But he was good to your mother, I guess? Or were you
yeah. But when I got a bit older, sort of in my teens, my father bloody hit the grog, and then he'd become, verbally abusive to me. Never hit my mother. Verbally
what about you?
Abusive. No, never hit me.
Okay.
No. My father was his own man. He's the sort of, a man's man type of guy, you know. I remember when he was in his 40s, he used to belong to a thing called the Markets Club, which is Rockley had a big market, so you had all the fresh food, fruit and vegetables would come in there and all that. It was a proper market. For some reason, he belonged to the Markets Club, and some guy, in his 40s, mind you, he said something about my father's ears.
Okay.
He was a bit sensitive about his ears because maybe they stuck out a little bit, right? And he was being, you know, giving my father a hard time. He dropped him.
You were there?
No, he dropped him. He dropped him. Just bang, hit him, knocked him out. He got banned from the club for bloody months, you know. But, you know, he'd grown up in the bush at 13, on your own, working on a property in the middle of nowhere in Australia. And he was a shearer for many years. He was a shearer, and they'd travel. I don't know if you have this in America, but they sort of start in the south and they'd move from town to town, going up the country with following the sheep stations. They'd shear all the sheep here, then they go to the next one, the next one, the next one. And one story I remember, he was with shearers, young. They're all young blokes, right, in their 20s. Very back-breaking, literally back-breaking work, because you're bending over, shearing the sheep. It's back-breaking work. And they met a crew coming south. They'd finished, they were going south, and he said to some bloke, any good-looking shearers in this next town? Good-looking girls, you know. And the guy said, only one. Brenda Hersey, that's my mother.
Oh, wow.
So he met my mother, and then eventually they got married, and you know, that was it. So these are very small towns.
How old was he when he got married?
How old were they now? My mother must have been about, dad's born in 27, mum was born in 32, so a 5-year difference. So maybe my mum would have been, my father's about 25, I think, when he got married. So mum was 19, 20.
And they had you right away, or she had many miscarriages?
No, they had me a couple of years later. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And so my father was, you know, he was really his life was his life. You know, he wanted to gamble, he wanted to smoke, he wanted to drink. He did all that. I don't smoke. I've never smoked.
And you decided while you were growing up with your father that that's something I'm not going to smoke. You have children?
Yes, I have a daughter. She's just recently got married in Australia, and
she's the first.
She's the eldest, and she's down there. She's 28, and my son, he's 21. He's back here. He was in Bristol in England doing second-year law, but they've because they're now in sort of SWAT-vac. SWAT-vac means it's a break between classes and examination. We call it SWAT-vac in Australia. Okay. SWAT vacation. Swatting means to really hit the books hard. So he's in that sort of stage to say, look, I may as well come home and do it at home.
What kind of law is he thinking about?
Oh, I don't know. He's in second-year law. I mean, they're doing everything, you know. So he's here. He's back here. Been here, and he'll do that till end of May, and then he'll go back in. I think he goes back in August this year for year 3. So he's back. Mum's happy about that, I can tell you.
Yeah, I don't think you're too sad either.
Yeah, he went. Did your boys go to St Mary's by any chance?
No, my sons went to St Moore and they went to YS.
YS, okay. Well, he went to St Mary's. He went to St Mary's.
Yeah.
And,
well, he has a good group of guys. They're very close. St Mary's have a camaraderie that's.
Yeah, I picked a school because it was a boys' school,
why? You didn't want them in a co-ed school?
I did the research because it's quite clear that girls are academically better than boys at that age because they can sit and they can concentrate and they have the discipline. Where boys are like, you know, fireworks. They're all over the place. And so there's often that sort of tension of the girls are smarter than the boys, so the boys dumb down as a sort of rebellion, you know. So well, there's no point putting him in that situation. Why put him in a competitive situation where he's going to feel second class against the girls? Put him in a situation where it's all boys, and they can run around, they can play sports. He's very sporty. I've always been very sporty too, so he's very sporty. Get all that excess energy off, you know, let him go play basketball, love basketball. Me too, when I was at school, played basketball all the time, loved it, you know, get that energy going. So I thought very carefully about that. And also, in one of your podcasts, remember you talking with someone about what language, who was it you were talking about, the language you speak at home? It might have been Reich, Wooten, right?
Yes.
And I did a big study on bilingualism when he was born, a big study on bilingualism, and my daughter too, and I thought, okay, what's the research say? The research says your child should study in the language that's not the native language of the environment you're in. So we're in a Japanese-speaking environment, so he should study English in the educational system, and I should only speak English to him, and his mother should only speak Japanese to him, which is basically what's happened, you know. So although he went to primary school at Seinan Shogaku in Omotesando for about 4 years, but in that time, because it was Japanese all during the day, then she would speak to him in English at night time.
Oh,
so
your wife would?
My wife would, yeah.
Okay,
She was good enough to do that. So
right.
again, because helping to be bilingual, right, that's the whole point. So yeah,
that's something I thought about too. I was fortunate enough to meet a linguist. Both he and his wife were linguists.
I remember that, about they had 5 languages,
They
right?
had 5 languages.
Monday
and
was
I
this
taught-
language,
they
Tuesday was
shook-
this language,
and
Wednesday.
He told me,
that was
he said-
amazing.
He said, the child is not the problem, it's the parent.
Yeah.
You must be disciplined. So you must stay in the language. So I had even my staff at the time, because my staff were bilingual. Which language are you going to speak to my kids in whenever you speak to them? Whatever you choose, you stick in that.
Stick with that language, yeah.
That's how they're going to know you.
It's good, you know, because I have
That's
a
right.
guy I know, another Aussie, and I told him that when his child was born. I said, well, if you want your child to be bilingual, but he didn't have the discipline. So now,
See, a lot of people they get lazy,
child's not
and they make it
bilingual.
easy for themselves when the kids have to go somewhere, this and that. My kids would come to me and say, oh, Nakasita, and I say, what? I
Sure,
know exactly
yeah.
what they're saying.
He said,
I'd
too
say, what?
bad.
No, I would say, what? What? What are you saying? They said, well, I'm hungry. And then I would respond.
You were strict with them. That's good.
Yeah, because I figured I'd worked with so many other kids, Greg, at the time, and I'd been fortunate when I was an investment consultant that my manager, the guy that owned the company, said, Lance, you'll never know how good a salesman you are until you have your own kids.
Mm.
And I
Good
didn't
point.
understand it at the
Good
time.
point.
He said,
Good point.
because they'll know who you really are.
Mm.
You'll
And they're
know
the
that.
best salespeople in the world.
Tell me about it.
Dad, I want.
That's right. As if you have girls. I didn't have girls, I have 4 boys. So the sad thing about that, I think, for parents, because what they say is very true in many cases. Men will discipline their sons and spoil their daughters, and women will discipline their daughters and spoil their sons.
Mm. My wife's very disappointed because I'm really a my with my son, and she's the disciplinarian.
With him?
Yeah. She always expected, because I'm really, as I said, you know, self-reliant, independent, you know, very disciplined. She's expecting I'm going to be like that with him.
But you aren't.
I wasn't, because I think the relationship I had with my father, you know, he was focused on himself. He was focused, when you're a
But
gambler,
he's with you all the time.
but when you're a gambler,
Okay.
you're focused on yourself. When you're a gambler, you're addicted to gambling, you're focused on gambling. Gambling is everything, and family are not everything. So I grew up with that, and I didn't want to have that relationship with my son. I love my father, but my father was focused on gambling. It's a big difference. Anyone who's listening to this, they've got a father or a mother who's a gambler, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So it's a different mix.
feel.
So
Even
I didn't
though
want that.
Even though he spent a lot of time with you.
Well, he spent a lot of time with me, but
Yeah.
what were we doing? I'm working on the farm, you know, I'm the unpaid labour, you know, to help him and
Okay,
do
I see,
things,
I
you know.
see,
So
I
it's
see, I
a
see.
bit of a different thing, right?
I see.
And plus, I wasn't mechanical. I wasn't. He's gifted in that sense, you know. I was not.
So you can
I
help him
wasn't.
with that anyway.
I wasn't
yeah.
interested particularly, you know. I had my own path, you know. My
Okay.
path.
So did your mother ever do anything? Did she work?
No, my mother never worked. Never worked.
So she just took care of the house?
She worked before she got married, but yeah, she took care of me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did she have many siblings?
Yeah, she had an older brother and a twin brother.
Okay.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, the twin brother, this is how it worked, right? The twin brother got educated. He was sent off to Rockhampton Grammar School, which is a private school, and they scrimped and saved to send him there, and then he joined the bank, safe, solid bank job, you know, and he worked in the bank his whole career, you know, very solid, very safe. So my uncle, her elder brother, he left home young to support the family. He had to get work, so he worked, send money back to the family, because when my mother was 8, her father died. The father had been English, the mother and father are English, which in Australia at that time is not a plus.
Of course, they were not happy
Not a
with
plus, being English in a small country town, right, with an accent. And plus my grandfather was well educated. He came from a wealthy family, he was educated.
But still English.
English, but well educated.
Okay.
So he could speak a number of languages, you know. But he had a health condition, and the doctor said, you should go to a warmer climate, it'll be good for your heart. So for whatever reason, he wound up in the Philippines. I don't know why the Philippines. He's working in Manila for a number of years. And then he came down to Australia, to Brisbane, and that's where he met my grandmother. My grandmother had been a nurse in World War One, and so she's nursing all the wounded troops coming back from the front, English troops, American troops, Canadian troops, Australian troops. And she noticed the Australian troops, even though they're wounded, just like everyone else, they're bright, they're happy, you know, they had a different energy about them. And they're telling, oh, the streets are paved with gold and it's fantastic and, you know, blah, blah. So against her family's wishes, which is unbelievable in Victorian England, this is still Victorian England basically, she came by herself down to Australia, and she was cut off from the family from that point on. Cut off. Just parents never contacted her again. You didn't do what we said, you're out. She's again a very independent woman. So then she met my grandfather, and then, unluckily for her, they went into the bush because he got a job running a property out in the bush. And then that's how my mother wound up being born in Iceland. Very, very tough.
Where's your father's family from?
Brisbane. My father, he's like a fifth generation, and
his
his father, in fact, all six generations
they
of my
English?
family, originally, were entrepreneurs. My original family, actually very ironic. There's a place near Bristol where my son goes to uni called Henbury, which is probably now a suburb of Bristol, and they were based there. And the reason I know that is because when they came by ship round to Tasmania, they were in this valley, and they built a stone house, and they called it Henbury after where they came from. So they were a farming family. In those days in Australia, if you had capital, they weren't convicts, they were free settlers. If you had capital, in relation to the amount of capital you had, the government would give you land because they needed you. They couldn't develop it. They needed you to cut down the trees, create the farming land, create industry, you know, and which is what they did. So the first generation did that, second generation did that, and my great-great-grandfather, he went chasing gold in the Victorian gold rush, like you had the California gold rush. He went chasing gold in Victoria, and then somehow he wound up in Queensland, and that part of my family's been in Queensland ever since. And so he was, you had a thing called, I think it was Wells Fargo with the carriage and the horses. They had a thing in Australia called Cobb & Co., which was the copy of Wells Fargo. And they had special hinge technology, which is spring technology, which was developed in the States because of the roads, right? There's no paved roads. And so they brought that technology to Australia, and Cobb & Co. was the mail and delivery mechanism. And he ran that, and then he also had a job as a land and stock broker, buying and selling property land for people as a broker. And then he bought his own properties. Eventually he moved down to Brisbane, had a agricultural listed company. He, with some partners, started a listed company on land development, that type of thing, produce, that type of thing. And then his son, my grandfather, was a butcher. So he had the contacts in the bush and buy the cattle, the sheep or whatever directly, and then have them in his butcher shop. And then he got wiped out actually in the Depression in the 30s. The business continued, but it was very tough, you know. And 7 kids, so it wasn't easy. And then
your father was number what?
My father was he was the second eldest boy. So my uncle Colin was the eldest, and this is interesting too. Colin was the eldest. Then you had 4 girls, and my father was about number 4.
Yeah,
4 or 5, I can't remember, 5, maybe 5, he's maybe number 5, and then he had a younger sister and then a younger brother, Uncle Mick, and then my father, my uncle, he was sent to university. Only one in the family to go to university.
The first one?
Yeah, first one. He went to Queensland Agricultural College, and he became a specialist in the sugar cane industry, which is in Queensland a big industry. And he's a big wheel, or was a big wheel, he's passed away now. But he's a big wheel in the sugar industry and the science research lab side. He was not a scientist per se himself, but he was running the research labs, organising the scientists in the sugar industry. Interesting thing, when he passed away, I wasn't actually there, I was here, I couldn't go for the funeral, but my auntie sent me the notes on the background of him from the funeral notice, and at the actual funeral itself, and I had no idea. My wife's Japanese, he never said anything, But he was in Papua New Guinea during the war, fighting the Japanese Imperial Army in the mountains of Papua New Guinea, which is just brutal, absolutely brutal. And so,
World War
but
II,
he
right?
never, World War II, he never ever mentioned anything about that. He knew I was living in Japan, he had a Japanese wife, met my wife, nothing. Very, just had moved on, I was so shocked. Oh my God, well, Colin was in Papua New Guinea fighting the Japanese.
How old was he when he passed, do you know? His age?
Colin, he was in
Was he really
80s,
young?
I think, 80s.
Oh, he made it, okay, so he
Yeah, I
did
think
pretty well.
80s. He had a
That's
pretty
good.
pretty healthy lifestyle. He was always slim, very slim. Actually,
Was your father slim too?
yeah, my father. Well,
So it just heredity.
he was until he had an accident. He I forget how he had this. He cut his foot quite badly in in hospital for a little while, and he came out and still drinking, still eating, and he put on a bit of weight. Not massive, put on a bit of weight. But I'm 83 kilograms. So when I was competing in karate, I was in the 75 to 80 division.
How tall are you?
I'm in
180.
I'm 180, 1.5.
We're almost exactly the
Almost the
same.
same height. So I'm 180, 181.5, although I'm shrinking, I think. But I
So
was in that
bad.
75 to 80 division, so I'm 3 kilos heavier than when I'm competing, which is not bad.
What style? Shotokan?
Shitoru.
Shitoru.
Shitoru,
Okay,
yeah.
Shitoru.
But I was competing in all style. It wasn't, I did compete in singular style, but we were doing, in Australia, we were doing state championship, national championship, doing the work. So that's everyone had to go. When I started, there were no weight divisions. So as a 17-year-old, I'm competing against men, I'm competing
right.
against heavyweights
That's
too.
right, that's right.
like-
And you knew it too. You
Oh,
found
yeah.
that out real quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me ask you this, Greg. Once you graduated from high school, did you go straight to college? Or
No,
did you...
I went straight into selling encyclopedias door to door.
Why is that? It's almost parallel. But only I did that while I was in the service because I was drafted. Vietnam was your time too.
I missed the draft by about 6 months.
Listen, I was number 6 on the lottery. And the lower your number, the more chance you had of going in. And I'm from a big city. Went straight in. And then, when I got my notice, I enlisted into the Air Force because I didn't want to go to Nam. And that's what stopped me from going to Vietnam.
Yeah, well, I was turning 18, and at that time, it was a lottery system based on your birth date number. If your number came up, you're off. And I knew, I'm going. I knew for sure, if I'm in that draft, I'll be drafted. I'll be in Vietnam for sure. I knew it. And then
But is the
luck would have it.
They don't have anything like that with if you're the only child in the family?
Oh, nothing. Irrelevant. Didn't matter.
Really?
No difference. So, pure luck. Gough Whitlam, who was a leader of the Labour Party, which is an opposition to the Liberal Democratic Party, not Liberal Democratic Party, Liberal Party, won the election in 72. And he did 2 things in particular which changed my life. One was he said, right, we're out of Vietnam. And they stopped the draft immediately. So I never got in the draft. And the second thing he said was education university is free. So I had no chance. When you grow up in a poor family, your father's a big gambler, you got no chance, no money. So I went straight into 16. Imagine this, 16. You go and memorize the whole 25-minute pitch. You have to memorize it. Until you can memorize the whole thing, you're not allowed out to see anybody. So in this company that I was working for Britannica,
Okay, for the Britannica.
go in every day and have to memorize the whole thing, and then you'd practice and role play, and then when they were satisfied you could do it, out you go. They drop you in a low socioeconomic suburb at 6 p.m. 6 p.m. they drop you, pick you up at 10. So off you went, and door to door, Encyclopedia Britannica, brutal, absolutely brutal, at 16. And I thought, Jesus, I'm hopeless at this. I can't sell. I just cannot sell. I'm no good. So after, I don't know how many weeks that I did that, I quit.
Oh, so you hadn't sold anything in the week?
Oh, I sold one lot, and then they cancelled it after I sold.
Okay.
So I was like, oh my God, I made a sale and then it would cancel. I go, this is hopeless. So I'm not making any money here, It was terrible. And then I got a job in a garage pumping gas. I was in a gas stand pumping gas.
Yeah.
Then I got a promotion. I was in this big, like a transport centre where all the big semi-trailer trucks had come in, diesel, and I'd be pumping gas into those things. And then I got a job as a clerk. I was a very low-level clerk in a state government insurance office. which I did that. My first day, I almost quit. They had this big long wooden box.
No, you're 17 now?
Yeah, 17.
Okay,
Big long wooden box of workers' compensation checks. When you got injured, you'd get sent a check of a certain amount of money to compensate you for the time you couldn't work. But these would come back, they'd be paid and come back. And I get this big long box checks. Sort these into numerical order. Doing this all day. Kill me now, you know, like I gotta quit. But there were a bunch of young guys my age there, you know, and I sort of fell in with them. And, you know, I'm sporty, they're sporty. I mean, Australia's interesting. I played all codes of, I didn't have your code of football, but I played soccer at what you'd call elementary school, primary school. I played rugby league at high school. I played Australian rules football at high school. I was volleyball, swimming in the team. I was playing basketball in the team. Everything, you know, running. Wasn't much
Did you have
running.
anything favored?
Basketball, by far.
You love basketball?
Oh, yeah, I loved it. We play before school, we play on the breaks, we play at lunchtime, we play after school. Every day.
Did you have any position you liked the best?
I wasn't tall enough to be in the centre or, you know, I was probably more of a guard.
Okay.
I was pretty quick, but I wasn't very tall. You know, I was a little bit taller than most people, but I wasn't. Like, the centre was huge. You know? Our school was started that year that I went there. So it was a very, very unique. It was like the UN. You had kids from every country in the world who were migrants going to that school. You know, I was saying before, you got Poles, you got Italians, you got Ukrainians, you got everybody, Finns, you got everyone there. And it was the first year that school started. And despite that, just 5 years, by the time we got to year 5, which is 9, 10, 11, we call that middle school, 11, 12, we call that high school, senior high school, we got to the finals of the Brisbane all high school basketball championship. Unbelievable. We got to the finals in 5 years.
You had a great coach. You had a great coach.
We had a good coach. You know why we had a good coach? He was the Baptist minister who was also a basketball guy. And he had a really hot-looking daughter too. He had a really hot-looking daughter. She was so hot-looking, that daughter. Anyway, so his son was in the team and he started coaching us. And from that moment, things changed. He was good. And anyway, the daughter was way too tall for me. But anyway, so that was good. And then, you know, loved sports and fell in with these guys, and that was good. And then I started karate training when I left school.
What made you decide to do karate? You started this
when
in
I was
Australia?
at high school, this is a sort of basketball-related story. There was a guy, his family, there were 3 boys. They came from the Northern Territory, which is like the very deep north. You know, there's like real cowboy territory. I don't know, maybe, I don't know, is West Texas like really redneck area like that? Like that, right? They came down. And he was like 18, different schooling system. So I'm 16 in high school, he's 18. You can imagine, right?
Right.
Big difference, right? He'd been doing boxing up there, right? He's quite well polished boxers because it's pretty rough and tough cow country out there, right?
Okay.
So he just sort of arrived, went playing basketball one day, and he was playing against me, and I sort of faked left and went right around him and scored. He didn't like that, so he called me out, and he wanted to fight with me. Except I didn't know how to fight, you know, and I knew enough that you don't know how to fight this guy, don't even go there, you know.
Right.
It was humiliating. It was humiliating because there was a situation, a physical situation. I didn't have any prep for that. I didn't know anything. And I thought, well, this is no good. This is no good. I don't want to have this ever happen again in my life. So at that time, you had judo. It didn't really grab me. Wrestling, no, it didn't grab me. Boxing, no, you get hit too much in boxing. Can't be that smart doing boxing. And then James Bond movie, right? one shuto strike and down. That's what I want to learn. That's the one. And at that time, you couldn't learn karate because you couldn't find a dojo because they were too small and too poor to advertise. So, then you have to know somebody. And I'd go to the library and I'd get out the book by Kanazawa Sensei from Shotokan and got the backyard and could not make heads or tails, but could not make sense of it, right? And then finally there was an ad when I started work at the insurance company. In the YMCA had this big ad for every possible hobby you could imagine, a big page full of these. There's one course, 10-week course on karate. I'll try that. Wasn't that expensive. I thought, I'll try it. 10 weeks, I'll try it. So I turn up, and I was there at 7, because it was 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, 8:30, 7 to 8:30. But at 5:30 to 7, there was another class training. So when I arrive, we're all sort of sitting outside, t-shirt and shorts, and they're inside. You can hear this ki-ai, you're always yelling and looking through the door, you know what's going on, these people in pyjamas leaping around. What the hell's going on? And anyway, so I know exactly what we did because I taught that class myself many times. So I know what we did. And at the end of it, we're sitting on the wooden floor, which is hard on your knees, right? Sitting in meditation with your seiza, that seated position. We're meditating, and I got summer. It's like this is January in Brisbane, which is like hot, really humid, really hot. I got sweat pouring down my face. But I remember, I'm sitting there. I got sweat running down my face. My knees are killing me. My toes are killing you. Your feet folded behind you. This is for me. I knew it straight away. I was hooked.
How old were you?
17. I was just turned 17.
I was
hooked. And from that moment on, that was it. And so I'm now this is 51st year this year, training for 51 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And so what we used to do.
Where did your son down? Yunda?
Oh, good. I got Rockadown now. Rockadown. Yeah.
Wow,
and so
congratulations. Wow.
We would train when I got through the beginner class. We trained 5:30 to 7 in that dojo, and then the Hombu dojo was in a very distant part of the CBD, the Central Business District. Can't believe it. So I'm wearing my dogi, my shoes, and I'm running through the city in my dogi, 7 o'clock at night, from one dojo to the other dojo, do another hour and a half of training. So I'm double training. I did that forever, and then in 19 months, I went from white belt to black belt, which was unheard of.
19 months.
Unheard of.
You
unheard of.
Breathe, ate. That's all you did.
Unheard of. And we had a Japanese teacher, Kusano.
What did your parents think about this? Because you were coming home. That's all you did.
No,
did you have a makiwara at home too?
No. We didn't use makiwara in those days. At that time.
Oh, they didn't.
At that time. That came later. But that's when Iba Sensei came to Australia. But we had Kusano Sensei came out from Japan. We had a Gashku.
So you were doing katas.
I did my training, grading with kumite, kata, basics, the whole works, and I got my shoda at the age of 18.
Did you ever, by any chance, bump into the guy on the basketball court again?
No, I didn't. But I'll tell you an interesting story. It's interesting how your mind works. It was a hot day in Brisbane. It was during the daytime, and I went into a pub. Not to get a beer. I went to a pub to get like an orange juice or something like that, something cold, you know. And I walked in. I'm having this drink. Something wrong here. I could sense it. There's something wrong here.
No, your age again now. At this time is, how old are you now?
Oh, I'm probably about 19, 20.
19, okay. So
I could sense something's wrong. Mm-hmm. So I just walked out. My sense told me there's going to be trouble here. I didn't know what the trouble would be. I didn't know who would be the trouble.
You could tell.
But I walked out, and it's that sense has kept me out of trouble because I don't want to get into trouble.
That's right, and
then have to get out of it because one of two things will happen. If something happens to me, I get hurt, or if I hit them, and they go down and they hit the back of their head on anything hard. And they die or injured, I'm in jail.
For the rest of your life, right.
So it gives you that sense. It's interesting. You remember, I guess given how your mind works, right? Will Smith hits Chris Rock. Now, when you saw that, you saw him walk up and hit him, right? This is what I saw. Will Smith is off balance. His body torque is such that all Chris Rock has to do is push that hard on his right shoulder at a 90-degree angle, and Will Smith is going to go down in his tux with just that much effort. See, that's my brain is not looking at the violence if he smacked him. I'm looking at, he's off balance. He's over-torqued.
Right.
So all Chris Rock's got to go is go tap.
That's interesting.
But poor old Chris Rock wasn't trained, obviously.
But not just that. He was not. That was a sucker punch.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That's
king hit. We call that a king hit,
the
right?
last thing he expected.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's something. I took martial arts when I was in Puerto Rico, and there was just a few of us. And I never forget when the guy that was training us, he was like a master sergeant, short guy, and they tend to have sometimes complexes, and he was very strong. He made me the instructor while he was gone, and I was all of 19. Wanted to prove myself. So I was very brutal to everyone while I was gone, jumping on their stomachs. I did everything you shouldn't do.
Yeah, we used to do that too.
I did all this stuff. Anyway, he heard about this. So when he came back 2 weeks later, he said, Lance, I heard that you were kind of hard on everybody. I said, yes. He said, well, I have a new move for you. And he said, put me in a chokehold. And he said, you have your cup on? I said, yes. And he said, so I knew he was going to go for the groin, but he said, put me in a chokehold.
What
so
style was this?
Shotokan.
Shotokan, okay.
So I turned sideways and I put him in a chokehold. He said, you got me? And I said, yes. And he goes like this. He goes, and spat in my face. And as soon as he did, I went like this.
The next thing.
Then he hit me in my throat, hit me in my groin, and put me in the ground.
Uh-huh.
And he said, Lance, as I lied down there, and I mean, he hit me hard, so hard. I mean, I just thought, why did he do this? I mean, he hit me hard enough to swell up my throat. And he hit me in my groin. The cup didn't matter.
Yeah, I know.
And he said, no matter how good you get,
Yeah.
you'll never beat surprise.
Yeah.
So I quit.
Yeah, really? That was it?
I was done.
All right, okay.
I knew I was the best there they
Yeah,
had.
yeah.
But I finished. I didn't do anything. So then what he said to me after that, he saw me about a month or 2 months later, and he made me come, because I was avoiding him. Because what he did to me was not necessary.
No.
So he came to me and he said, Lance, he said, I know you've been avoiding me. The beast was not that big. And I saw him several times, but I made sure I went the other way. He said, I did that to you because of this story. I was you. I went to a local bar, became the bouncer. I broke a guy's arm and his leg, and it didn't have to be done.
Right.
Fast forward, about a year later, I'm in a parking space out in this area, and someone starts shooting. So I wondered where, and I realized they were shooting at me.
Oh.
And then took off. The guy took off, didn't hit him, but he hit the cars beside him. And he didn't see who it was, but he knows in his heart it was that guy.
That guy.
And he said, you were headed to that.
Yeah, that could have been you.
He said, if you ever find yourself having to use this, you should leave that person one of two ways, in convulsions or completely still.
Because we were training in very traditional karate, so it's all about control. That's why, someone like Will Smith, no control. That's just not allowed, Like my wife, he was defending his wife. Would you do that for me? I said, no. If someone was abusing, I'd tell them to stop it.
There was no threat. There was
yeah, exactly. I'm not going to go and hit somebody, especially a king hit like that, right? No, of course I'm not going to do that. We're taught to be controlled. That's no control. I think when you train in martial arts, you're very tuned up to your environment, people, because when I'm around people, without thinking about it, I'm scanning the room for trouble. Without even thinking about it, I'm just automatically scanning the room. Who's built, who's not built, who's likely to be trouble. It's just psychologically, in the back of my mind, it's going on all the time. So I guess that training sort of sticks with you. But I love the training. I mean, training was so hard. You're talking, we're starting at 5:30 in the afternoon in summer in Queensland. Jesus, you can't, you're training in a pool, a literal pool of sweat is so hot. Your belt's soaked, your dogi's soaked, everything's soaked. It was unbelievable.
And you loved
every minute of it. I loved it, yeah, I loved it. I loved it. I competed right through. And then I became a coach.
Did you have your son take up martial arts?
I did. And he trained here at TAC with Goshi Sensei.
Yes.
No, she didn't do martial arts. But, again,
he didn't have that.
What did he do? He dropped out to do basketball. I wanted him to do, he was a junior, and he got his black belt. And then he said, Dad, he got his black belt. He said, Dad, I'm doing karate because of you. I really want to do basketball. What can I say?
How many years did you do karate?
He trained for about 3-4 years.
But how old was he when he was doing that?
Oh, he started. He was very young. He was about
I'm sure you put him in as soon as he started walking.
I think 10 or something. No, he was about 10. He was about 10. No, I didn't start him too early. I need a little bit of maturity, right? And he was actually training in 2 dojos. He's training in the one here in TAC, and then in Shirogane-dai, where I live, there was at the Shogakko, there was another dojo. Same Gojuru, same group, same Yamaguchi group. And there was another different teacher there. And he'd go there on Friday night. So it'd be Wednesdays here and Friday there. And I'd go and watch him.
I know you were.
Yeah, I'd sit there, freezing cold in the winter. I'd sit there and watch the whole class, watch there and watch his training here, And then he said, "I want basketball." So then he said, "Mary's the basketball team." But he did well. He got into even when they were in junior high school, they got into the varsity team. And then when he was in senior high school, continued in the varsity. He was that good to be in the varsity.
Is he the
team.
same height as you?
Yeah, and then he stopped basketball in
he's
year.
not taller than you.
It's his mother's fault. His mother's fault. I blame her.
See, my son,
Slightly shorter than me. He's about 170,
yeah.
175 or something.
Same with my son.
Like that, right? That's his mother's fault. And so, but he stopped when he got to, because he's doing the International Baccalaureate. So in year 11, and halfway through year 11, he stopped basketball just to concentrate on study for the IB. He just full on for the IB, which must have been hard for him because he loved the basketball. He really enjoyed it. He enjoyed his mates and he enjoyed the game.
He did this. He decided to do
He
this.
wanted to do basketball, yeah.
No, but I'm talking about the IB. He
The
decided.
IB, the school is the IB, and we wanted him to do the IB. He didn't have a
Okay.
choice about the IB. It's
You never chose.
you're doing the IB, buddy. You're doing the IB. You want to get anywhere, you'll do the IB, So that was decided.
That wasn't a discussion at all.
And a similar discussion, someone else in your show who maybe it was Bevan. Maybe it was Bevan.
Yeah.
He sent
Neil,
his
with his
daughter
daughter.
to UK, right? And the same thing he said. I said, "Son, you're not going to America for university.
Yeah.
America's out, just out. Forget about it. Not going to America. So it's going to be either Australia or the UK, not even Canada." And I said, "Australia's a bit too small. You want to do law. They don't have that many big law firms down there. I think if you want to do law, you should go to UK. Big law firms there, and you should study there." And so we did a big tour one year. A big tour of UK. It was tens of it was probably a whole week just driving around the UK, visiting unis, and then he picked one, Bristol, so he went there. But very similar idea.
How'd you get to Japan? Let's go there.
Well, when I was doing the karate, I got very frustrated with my Japanese teachers, Sensei Iba, who came out in '74 because, Lance, if I thought it was up, he thought it was down. If I thought it was black, he thought it was white. I was like, what's going on here, Everything was different. My first real experience of the culture difference. And I thought to myself, if ever I'm going to master this karate, I've got to go to Japan and understand how the Japanese think because I cannot work this guy out. And at that time, I could not separate Iba the man and the art of karate. They were one thing to me. I couldn't see which was which because his word was law and everything he said was like God was speaking. And you had to follow everything that God said, And so I worked on all the 3K jobs, Kitsui, Kitane, kick-in jobs for a number of years after school to get enough money to go to uni. Went to uni when I was 21. I did modern Asian studies at Griffith University, and that university just started. And I'd had that experience in my high school of just starting, so I knew what that experience was like. I was always the senior, and I thought, this is a pretty good idea, I'll do this again. I want to do that faculty, I want to do that particular thing. And so, as it turned out, I studied Chinese in the first year, and then in the second year I could have started Japanese, but I already started a year of Chinese, I didn't want to quit. So I went right through Chinese. And then, plus, politics and economics, society for Japan, China, and Indonesia, 3 main countries to focus on. Then, at graduation point, I did my honours year, which is the next year, 3 years plus an extra honours year, because I want to be an academic, I want to be like my professors. And then I got a scholarship, the Monbusho scholarship, to come to Japan for 2 years as a graduate. And I thought, well, here's my ticket to go and study karate. and do the other thing, and learn Japanese. So it all sort of came together in the end. And I don't know why I thought when I started studying Chinese, well, one day I'll learn Japanese. I don't know why I thought that, but I did. So I had the Chinese, I had the Japanese, and so I did. I was doing a study of Sino-Japanese relations, and a master's degree on that, and then my Ph.D. was also on that. So I was combining Japanese source language, Chinese source languages, the resources for my doctorate. So it all sort of worked out in the end. And I was teaching English, and every weekend I'd get on the bullet train. I go down to Himeji, where our headquarters was. I get there on Saturday afternoon, train Saturday night, get back on the bullet train Sunday morning, come back and keep studying, It was like that. I did that for 6 years. Did that for 6 years. I did 2 years just language study, 2 years master's degree, went back home for a year and a half, set up the Ph.D, came back for a year and a half on field work. So about six years altogether. Roughly.
It's very interesting based upon the way that you were raised, which wasn't so untraditional, particularly in Australia at that time. Your laser focus all the way through. I mean, was you, well, I guess maybe
karate,
but not just that. No. Don't forget your father. You said he was a gambler, and that's what he was.
He was, yeah.
That was a laser.
And that was the road not to take.
But isn't that interesting? But he was focused on something. He stayed on. Was your mother like that in any way?
My mother was quite strict with me. Quite strict. I think, she'd grown up with a mother who was from Victorian England.
So that's, yes.
So I think that sort of filtered down to me. She was very strict with me. I mean, I wasn't, you think about this, right? Think about this. When I was a teenager, I was not allowed to wear jeans into town. If I was going into Brisbane city itself, city centre, because we're in a suburb, I was not allowed to wear jeans.
You had to wear your slacks.
Yeah.
Your proper, yeah.
Yeah, could not wear jeans. That was not allowed. Couldn't have long hair. Was not allowed.
So she kept you trimmed?
Well, by my parents, you had short hair all the whole time. It was only when I left home at 18, so I could do what I liked, So wear jeans. If I want to go to town, I could have my hair a bit longer.
So when you came here, so you come here to Japan.
That was 79, 1st of April, 1979.
But you did college in Australia first.
I did 4 years.
4 years.
I did 3
so
years,
did
a Bachelor of Arts degree, then an extra year of Bachelor of Arts honours degree, and then I came here, did the 2 years of language study, then I did a master's degree here, went back, started the PhD, came back for the field work.
You went back, started your PhD?
Well, you've got to set up your PhD. You've got to do your research on what's your topic and resources and, how you're going to structure it and what's the topic going to be. So I did that, that took a year and a half to set that up. Then I came back to Japan on field work for a year and a half, did the interviews, collecting materials, doing translation. Then I went back and spent 5 years writing it up.
What was it on?
It was on a study of Japanese decision-making about economic cooperation in Chinese development. Because this is the early 80s we're talking, right? And at that time, Japan was relying on Australia for a lot of resources, right? But China had a lot of resources too. And like Australia, the resources are in sort of the middle of the country. And what the Japanese had done with Australia was they'd funded the development of the extraction of the resources through railways, port, power development to get it out. And they were doing the same thing with China through aid. And I was studying how they made those decisions about which particular areas they would develop and what particular things they put the money into, thinking that if ever China became a competitor for Australia, I would be someone who knows what's going on, and that might be useful to people, is what I thought. But what I didn't realise was, around about that time, I think it was about 83, Deng Xiaoping did his southern tour, so-called southern tour, where he said it doesn't matter if the cat is black or white, as long as it catches the mice, which is an absolutely radical statement. That cat had to be red, communist red, in China at that time, but he said no. We can be pragmatic. We don't care if it's a red cat, black cat, white cat, can it be pragmatic? That was a big turning point. And so ironically, what happened over those years, was that we became a major supplier to China, and we still are a major supplier of China of those resources too, because their development is so vast, they couldn't supply their own stuff, and their quality, their coal's not that good either, So, but you didn't know that back in the early 80s, right? And then I finished my PhD in '89, and then I had to get it, go through the challenging stage of having it looked at, and then I had to do some rewriting, which really irked the hell out of me. So I finally got it awarded finished at '89, got it awarded in 1990, finished there. But I'd started my own company before the end, and then I got headhunted into a company now called Jones Lang LaSalle. It was called Jones Lang Rutan in those days. I joined them in Brisbane to run the Japan desk. I didn't know anything about real estate, but I'd started my own company, but I realised I'd been a student in Japan. I didn't really know much about business. And I was doing okay, but it wasn't brilliant. But I realised there's a lot I don't know. And then this is like my MBA, to get an opportunity to go and learn about business from one of the most ruthless industries on the planet, real estate. Very, very cut and dry. And I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I had a great boss and a great group of people, and I really did that. And then about, that was 89 I joined. About 91, the bubble had burst in like, late 80s, early 90s in Japan, and the foreign direct investment faucet got turned off. So there wasn't any more money coming out of Japan. So I lost my job because there just wasn't a point of having a Japan expert if there's no Japan business. So, and I'd seen an ad in the paper for a job with Austrade. You don't really have an Austrade in America. You have a similar organisation, but it's not the same. It's called the Australian Trade Promotion Organisation. It's government, but it was very commercial. It had its own board. It ran like a private company. They recruited people like me out of the private sector. And so I happen to know the guy who was heading it, Craig Dodds, passed away a few years ago, unfortunately. And I'd missed the cut-off date. And I rang him up in Tokyo, say, hey, Greg, listen, I see the ad, I've missed the date, can I still apply? He said, yeah, go ahead, apply. So I applied and I got the job. So I had a choice. I thought they were opening one office. Turns out they're opening 4. It was going to be Fukuoka, Nagoya, Sendai, Sapporo. And he said, well, there's 4 offices. I said, well, forget Sapporo. I'm not going there. Too cold. I've never even been to Sendai, so I'm not going there either. I'll go to Fukuoka or Nagoya because I've been to those 2 places. And I actually want to go to Fukuoka because it's on the beach. Go surfing. But I got Nagoya. And that was hard. Started from zero. Started the office from zero. Hard.
And built it up to what?
Oh, I got promoted. I went from, basically we had about 4 people in Nagoya when I left, and I went to Osaka, which had about 25 people at the time. But Nagoya is very interesting. In Nagoya, the answer is always no. In business, the answer is always no. Really hard. And they don't like anybody. Particularly if you're from Tokyo, forget that you're a foreigner. You're Japanese from Tokyo, they don't like you. You're a foreigner, don't like you either. And the answer is always no. People from Osaka, yeah, we sort of don't like you either, but we'll sort of put up with you. Very interesting. A bit like Brisbane, my hometown, because the people who work in Brisbane probably graduated from schools in Brisbane. They work in Brisbane. They don't leave. The climate is so good. You don't want to leave. Why would you go anywhere? Stay there. Well, my whole family, no one left. They're all there, basically. So anyway, similar thing. And that was hard. Man, that was hard. And this is, like you do a deal, you think you've done a deal. The goods arrive in the airport or they arrive in the seaport. Then they renegotiate the price. This is Nagoya.
That's right.
This is Nagoya. It's tough. That was hard. And then I built that up and did quite well. And then that was a contract ended. And then there was another contract going to, as it turned out, timing-wise, to run Osaka. And I applied, I bid for the Osaka job, had to go through the interview process, it was open, anyone, external, internal, anyone can bid for the job. Went through the interview process, got the job, started running Osaka, did that for 4 years, moved to Kobe after the earthquake. And then I got married in Kobe. My Japanese wife was from Nagoya, I met her there, but then...
So you waited for quite a while to get married.
Yeah, I was there. I was 4 years.
What year was that you got married?
That was 98. 98. Yeah, 98.
Yeah, you waited for a while.
Yeah. Well, I was Nagoya 92 to 96. Then I was working in Osaka 96 to 2001.
You've only been married once?
Twice.
Okay,
my daughter's from a first marriage.
Oh, okay. So your first marriage was when?
Oh, I got married young. I was 21 when I got married. When I started university.
Japanese?
No, Australian.
Australian, okay. So okay, got it.
Yeah.
And your son is from your
second
wife?
Second marriage. Yes.
Okay.
My daughter's from the first marriage, yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I was talking to my first wife today.
You did?
Yeah, I couldn't get her yesterday for Mother's Day, so I was going to
She's in Australia?
Yeah, we're great friends.
Oh, that's
Still
good.
great friends.
That's good.
Yeah, great friends.
And you said your daughter just got married?
She just got married, yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
To someone Australian?
Yeah, actually, well, his family are Italians. His family. His mother's Italian, his father's Australian, and so I've not met him yet because of COVID. I haven't been able to get down there. Right? I've not even met him. I'll get to meet him sometime, I guess. But so my job in Osaka was great. What I love about Osaka, yes, no, very clear.
And
yes
money,
or no.
They're talking about money first too.
Yeah, yes, no, very clear. You're interested? No, we're not interested. I love that. Okay, we know where we stand here. Tokyo, it's a definite maybe. It's a definite maybe in Tokyo. Nagoya, it's no. Tokyo,
You got
different
that right.
maybe. Osaka,
You're right.
yes or no? Boom, I love that. And I loved Osaka. It was great. I
And the food
enjoyed
is
it.
good. The food is
Oh, food is
good.
fantastic. The people, I mean, this is an exaggeration, but
Yes.
the people in Osaka remind me of Latin culture, you know. They love having a good life and the
Yes.
food and
Yes,
they,
yes.
music and whatever, you know.
That's right.
And
That's
Osaka
good.
is very, very like that. And Tokyo is very sort of formal, a bit more, I'd say English, you know.
They are very,
upper
very
class,
London, most
English,
definitely, no doubt about it.
conservative to me.
Right.
Nagoya is very, very country, you know, very country town, insular. Sakoku Jidai has not far stopped there, it's still going. And I loved it, I loved Kobe, I lived in Kobe, it was great. I had this, in Nagoya I was a consul and I was a trade commissioner. In Osaka I was a consul general and I was a senior trade commissioner.
Australia.
Yeah, and that was a great job because I represented my country in karate, which is a great honour. And
What year did you do that?
Oh, this is when I was doing karate, you know, when I was back in the years. But as a worker, in Austrade, you're representing a country in business. Because what we would do is we'd find the buyer, we'd do the deal, and then all I had to do was set the price. We couldn't set the price and supply it, but we did everything. I love that. It was great, very pleasurable. It was a great job. There was a lot of esprit de corps. You felt very good about your job, and then I sort of ran out of runway there because it's like 4 years. You can't last there forever. So I had to move, and then by chance the job came up to run Tokyo, and then I became Koshi minister in the embassy. So I was like the ambassador. Then the next rank down is Koshi, the ministers. I was the second rank down to the ambassador.
First secretary. Right?
No, first secretary's down the bottom of the pile.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, you have minister, and then you have below that. So anyway, but I did enjoy that, and then I ran out of runway there too because that was like I would have had 4 years, and then I would have had to move. And my son had been born in 2001 in Kobe. He's a Quebeco, and so we moved up to Tokyo. And I thought to myself, you know what? I want him to become bilingual in Japanese. I think that'll be a huge advantage for him in life. I don't want to leave Japan because I had my pick. I'd done very well. We'd been number 2 in the world twice in Osaka. When I moved to Tokyo, we became number 2 in the world. Then we became number 1 in the world by the measurement system they had at that time on sales. And then I was doing pretty well. And so, but I realised, well, another couple of years, I've got to move. So I wanted to stay. So I had to start thinking about leaving. And talk about chance. I happened to be giving a talk to the American Chamber, and there happened to be one guy in the audience who worked for Shinsei Bank. And, you know, you're doing Meishi Kokan, card exchange at the end, this guy came out, like, for a coffee with you, yeah, sure, you know, like, yeah, sure, you know, yeah, sure, right. But he actually rang me up a week later, we had coffee, blah, blah, blah. So I'd like you to meet my boss. Okay, meet your boss. So I met his boss. And then his boss started talking. I started to realise, oh, I'm being interviewed for a job here. It clicked, you know. I thought, And so he said, look, you know, blah, 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 this is what we do, you know, what would you do? And so I put together a business plan for him. And I said, well, this is what I'd do. And they offered me a job for the Shinsei Bank. And I thought, well, I don't know anything about, this is retail banking, right? Retail banking. I thought, well, you know what? Clients are retail banking clients. They don't know anything about banking either, so it can't be that complex. And I'm not going to be the guy who's going to be producing product. That's a very specialised job. That won't be my job. And my job's going to be something else. So I quit. I quit the embassy. I quit the Australian Trade Commission. My boss was shocked. He was shocked. I gave him the resignation letter. I gave him 2 letters. I gave him my formal I quit letter, and I gave him I love you letter. You know,
That's right, exactly. Yes.
My heartfelt.
Yes.
You're my mentor.
Right.
You're my guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I really appreciate you. You know, from the heart. You know, and then here's the formal letter. Right, 2 letters. And he knew. And so then I joined the Shinsei Bank, and I loved it. And then they brought in Tamai, and that was the end of it. And so at that time, one of the big recruiting companies contacted me and said, we've got this job to run the National Australia Bank here in Japan. It's one of the big 4 banks in Australia, huge bank, 40,000 people, huge, global bank. And I said, oh, okay, it'll be pretty good. And it was retail. They had a retail operation. So I took that on and I did that for about 3 years. And at the time of doing that, there was like 2 paths in the fork of the road for me. We had, with some partners, we were bidding on the franchise for the Dale Carnegie franchise for Japan at that time.
Who was?
This is me and my other 3 partners at that time.
Okay, it had nothing to do with the bank.
Nothing to do with that.
Okay,
this is
that's what I'm saying.
personal.
This is your
me,
side. Your
me
high
as
side.
an investor.
Knowing that you weren't going to sit at the bank indefinitely, right?
Yeah, investing with some partners to buy this franchise, this training franchise for Japan.
Right.
But we didn't know if we're going to get the franchise or not. So we're sitting there, we've applied, we're sitting there, and this job came in from Corn Ferry about, okay, National Australia Bank, and then I had discussions with them, and then they made me an offer, and I hadn't heard about the franchise, and I took the bird in the hand. I said, okay, I'll take the bank job, but I will want to work in this business for myself later.
Mm-hmm.
And I did 3 years at National Australia Bank, and then they actually changed the business model in that 3 years. It got to a point where they wanted to branch out from just retail and go into a full service bank with a whole raft of things, which I wasn't the person to run that, so I knew this is not going to work. So that's when I came out, and I then took over Dale Carnegie. That was 2000 and what was it now? I'm trying to think. 2000.
We're going to have to leave soon.
2010.
We're going to have to leave in a little bit.
That's okay. 2010. 2010. So yeah, 2010. I've been running it for 12 years now. So 2010 I did that. So, and here I am. So now every generation of my family have been an entrepreneur, and I finally got to. But it's interesting, you know, when I look back, I was an entrepreneur in every business I worked in. I never saw myself as an entrepreneur, but I was an entrepreneur. I was constantly doing innovative things in all of those companies. I was an entrepreneur dying to become an entrepreneur without knowing it. But when I look back, I realize, yeah, I was doing this, I was doing this, I was doing this. Yeah, and now I finally made it and I bought my partners out in January.
I was going to ask you, yeah.
I bought them out in this January.
This past January.
26th of January is Australia Day, by chance. We signed the contracts
How
Australia
many
Day.
partners did you have?
At that stage, I had 2 left. One had departed the business earlier, I had 2 left. So I bought them out.
Wow.
So now I'm poor but free.
And you're Dale Carnegie in
Yeah.
Japan.
We've been here since 1963.
But in different stages, who had?
A guy called Mochizuki started in 1963 in Japan,
Mm-hmm.
and then Mr. Yamamoto took it over. He passed away within a year.
Mm-hmm.
Then his wife, Mrs. Yamamoto, took it over with her son, and then we took it over from Mrs. Yamamoto in 2007. Yeah,
Wow.
and she's a great lady. I have a good relationship with her.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been great. It's been
Well,
great.
I put my son through it when I knew you were going to go through it.
Yeah, well, actually, isn't that interesting? I was
That's
doing
right.
it the second time. He's my
That's
classmate.
Right, I know.
He's
So
my
I-
classmate.
That's right. So I had Lance go through it with you.
Yeah, no, it was great.
And then I got to come and see the last speech.
And actually, also, there's a couple of people from TAC who are also my classmates too.
That's right,
Yeah,
that's right.
it's interesting, from the TAC team who are doing it now.
Well, the way I wrap this up, Greg, is this. I always ask people this one question. What do you consider a good life in Japan?
I think it depends on the stage of your life you're in. I think for me, when I look at someone who's an aging boomer, into the boomers, right? If you look at what's our life expectancy, what's going to be important about convenience for someone in that boomer generation, big bubble coming through, wealthy bubble coming through. What are the sort of things you're going to want to have in terms of the facilities, in terms of the technology, in terms of how medical, etc., etc., etc. I think Japan is probably the best place in the world to age. I think Tokyo is the best city in the world, bar none, and I've been to about all of the major cities in the world. It's clean, everything works, the people are polite, there's no guns, there's no major drug problem, there's no major crime problem. It's it's got everything you'd want. And so for me, I think I built a house here, I'm not leaving. I'm a migrant in this country. I've never become Japanese because my wife's Japanese, I'm Australian. If ever we got to leave, if ever North Korea becomes a real problem, we got to leave, I've got a way for us to get out to go to Australia. So I don't want to become Japanese and close that off. In the same way that if we're somewhere and we got a problem and she's Japanese, she's got that Japanese capability of we always wonder, you never know what's going to happen in the world. Who can imagine we'd be having a major war in Europe like we've got now with Ukraine and Russia, and Slava Ukraine, by the way, Slava Ukraine. I hope you guys win. So, but you don't know. So I want to keep my Australian citizenship and forever, if I can here, but don't plan to go back. So I think Japan, it depends on the stage that you're in your life, but for me, this is, I think, the best place. Now, I love Australia. It's God's own country down there. I mean, really. That's why I say my family, nobody leaves. Why would you leave? It's great. Queensland. We have a great saying, that's a great tagline for Queensland. Beautiful one day, perfect the next. That's a great tagline.
That is beautiful.
And that's how good it is, right? So, and I love going down there. I love being Australian. I love going down there. But, my family's here, and so I'm here now forever.
Greg, I want to thank you so much for taking this time.
My great pleasure, and thank you for having me. And I look forward to catching up with you and have you on my podcast.
I can't wait.
Yeah, let's do that.
All of you watching this podcast, make sure you press like and subscribe. And remember, it's all unknown, so keep reaching for the stars because you're too blessed to be stressed.